Okay, kia ora everybody. If you're watching this, it means you are looking to write a full essay on Carol Ann Duffy's poetry. So this is what this video is going to cover. We'll talk briefly about how level 3 is different to level 2, looking at how to plan and structure a poetry essay specifically. We'll look at the paragraph structure, and then I'll explain what you are going to do. So just generally, we have gone through this before, but just to make sure you know that instead of responding to a question that starts with analyse how, you're going to be asked to form an argument by responding to a statement, whether you agree or disagree with the essay question. So it's based on how you see the text. And you can think of it this way, that instead of using the film or the poem or the novel or whatever to reach a discussion about the wider world or society, which is what you do in level 1 and 2, you use the text to make a point. In level 3, you start with a judgment about the world or literature and use the text to prove your point. So you start with an argument that you then use the text or texts to prove that point. So it's more about the place of literature and the purpose of it. You're going to form a critical response. So instead of just telling us the author did this, the author did this in the text, a critical response is arguing how successfully the author did that. So in Duffy's poems, how successful was she in presenting this argument or this idea to the reader? And that's your judgment, and that's also dictated by what your essay question is and what your thesis says. And your personal opinion is also relevant, whether you agree or disagree with the statement, whether you think Duffy's portrayal of the characters was fair or appropriate or relevant or whatever. But don't just take the I disagree stance constantly. You have to see some success in the poems, because if you're just saying nothing's done right, that's just a review, that's not a critical essay. So those are different things. So you do need to discuss the success to some extent in your essay. And just to make it as clear as I can, level 2, when you're writing an essay at level 2, it starts with analyse how. You discuss a key idea, you analyse techniques, you talk about what the director or author teaches us, and how it relates to the real world, to us, to the people around us. Level 3 is about your opinion and the wider success of the text. Okay, so it's the purpose and place of the text in literature and in our world that matters. So you're starting with the purpose and then talking about how the text achieves that purpose and how well it does in your informed opinion. Okay, and that's in relation to the statement that you are agreeing or disagreeing with. Again, take a hard stance, either agree or disagree. Don't agree to an extent, because then it gets messy, your argument isn't as strong. Pick a statement that you can strongly agree or disagree with. That is my advice. So in terms of planning your actual essay, where do you start? First thing, that you choose your essay question that you're going to look at. Then you decide whether you agree or disagree based on the poems. You then underline the keywords of the question, so figure out what it's asking you. You then define those keywords of the question. So what does successful mean? What does challenge mean? What does character mean? So you define it. Then you use those definitions to write your thesis statement. We've done a lot of that in class. So making sure that your thesis is responding to the question and encompassing everything you're going to talk about, the wider purpose of the text. Then you figure out what points you're going to make. How are you going to structure this argument? You'll see shortly that you can choose to do sort of 2 or 3 paragraphs depending on the structure of your argument, and I'll talk about that shortly. Then you figure out what evidence you're going to use, right? What techniques are you going to look at that are going to help you prove your thesis? And then you write the essay. Okay, so the plan should really not take you very long, just like you would do in an exam. So figure out what you're going to use and then get started writing your essay. So in terms of the essay structure, generally, it's not different to previous years. You have your introduction, you introduce your thesis, nice and easy. You make sure you're stating whether you agree or disagree with the question, all that normal stuff. The body of your essay, 2 to 3 paragraphs, depending on your argument, and your conclusion back to your thesis. That's all old news for you guys. But a poetry essay is a little bit more specific. In your introduction, your thesis needs to include both Medusa and Salome. Your thesis might be more than 1 sentence, that's okay, but for a poetry essay, you must talk about both poems. So one way you can approach it is 1 paragraph, you talk about Medusa, another paragraph, you talk about Salome. You can have a paragraph 3 doing a comparison if that is relevant. It really depends on the question that you're responding to and your thesis. It's harder to write like multiple paragraphs with comparisons. It can get messy and you can lose sight of the question. But if that's what you want to do, you can go ahead, but I recommend poem 1, poem 2, comparative if relevant. And then your conclusion is going back to your thesis for both poems. So thesis is going to be longer because you're talking about 2 poems. So in terms of the paragraph structure, again, sexy is your standard structure that you can follow. Statement, explanation, example, comment. This shouldn't be news to you guys. And you don't have to follow this rigidly because really this is just a logical way to write an essay. Okay? It's not a rule, but it's a suggested structure, like this makes sense. This is how you structure an argument. You say a thing, you give evidence, and then you explain what it means. That's how we write things in English. Okay? So follow the structure and you'll be fine. So let's look at it in a little bit more detail. So your statement, your first line of your paragraph, that's what the paragraph is going to talk about, relevant to your thesis. So which part of your thesis are you addressing in this paragraph? So if you've written a detailed thesis, often your first paragraph statement is inside your thesis. And I'm going to show you what I mean by that. So let's say this is my question. The most important characters are those who challenge us. The most important characters are those who challenge us. Let's say this is my thesis. Both Duffy's Medusa and Salome have a single narrative voice from the women themselves. They have a lasting impact on the reader because Salome's promiscuous nature and proud candor challenges our preconceived socio-ideology of the non-acceptance of a woman's sexual drive and freedom. And Medusa's transforming self-confidence challenges the preconceived social ideology whereby literary female characters' lives are governed by men. Okay? It's wordy, it's long, that's okay. I'm still making my point. I'm saying that the narrative voice in these poems challenges us because Salome challenges how we see female sexuality, and Medusa challenges how we see literary characters. So my first paragraph, my statement could be, Salome's promiscuous nature and proud candor challenges our preconceived social ideology of the non-acceptance of a woman's sexual drive and freedom. So I've already got it in my thesis. That's easy. My second statement, Medusa's transforming self-confidence challenges the preconceived social ideology whereby literary female characters' lives are governed by men. So within my thesis, I've already got my 2 statements, and that's absolutely fine. It might feel repetitive, that's okay. It's more important that you get the ideas down, especially for a practice essay, so you're not skipping any details. I've skipped the explanation because that's just standard. So statement, explanation, you're just explaining what you're going to talk about. It's nice and easy. The example, you need to critically analyze specific examples from novel, poetry, poems, sorry. So you need to pull out specific language techniques. This is where you can use the highlighted copies of the poems that we did together as a class and those lessons of unpicking quotes in more detail. But it's not enough to just say this is a metaphor. You need to evaluate the success of the language, okay? That's what makes it a critical response. How successful is this choice of language? And of course, it's all relevant back to your thesis, right? You're proving your thesis. You're proving your argument with this evidence. And the comment, so relevance to wider society. You use the author's name and discuss issues that go beyond the characters and the world of the poems, right? So the intention behind the text, making a judgment to the potential purpose of the poem. So what is the overall purpose of these texts? What is Duffy's point? Goes back to your thesis. You can talk about the impact on the reader and how successful the poems are, right? So you can make a judgment and say, this was Duffy's purpose. It is problematic with this poem because blah, blah, blah. However, it still achieves its purpose, right? It's entirely up to you. It is dictated by your question choice and therefore your thesis. So for example, if this was my statement, Salome's promiscuous nature and proud candor challenges our preconceived social ideology of the non-acceptance of a woman's sexual drive and freedom. So that's the statement for my paragraph. My comment, after I've given evidence, of course, I could discuss how the saint and sinner trope for women in text has created this expectation that women who are virgins are good and women who enjoy sex are bad. Women are judged for promiscuity while men are encouraged. Duffy makes us question why. Okay, so I'm talking about the place of female sexuality and the way it's seen and how Duffy challenges that and how we as the reader respond to that challenge. And remember, that's within one paragraph. That's the Salome paragraph that I would write. But again, everything is dictated by your question choice. So I'm going to show you where to find an example, introduction, and paragraph with this question. The most important characters are those who challenge us. So you can see statement, explanation, example, comment, color-coded. Ideally, 2 examples if you're writing an essay with 2 paragraphs. So I'm going to show you where to find that and what that looks like. So if you go into Teams and go up to Files, Class Materials, Poetry, Essay Writing, and Introduction and Paragraph Example. So you'll see here I've got my question at the top. The most important characters are those who challenge us. Here's my introduction. Underlined is my thesis. Okay, so that is my thesis underlined here. That's the same thesis I've used for the example previously in this video. So we can see this is one paragraph on Medusa, statement in pink, explanation in green, evidence and analysis in blue. You'll see I've got a second lot of green. That's because I need to explain my second quote that I'm going to use. Quote, analysis, discussion of purpose. Okay. This example is running under the assumption that there would be just 2 paragraphs. So 1 paragraph on Medusa with 2 pieces of evidence, 1 paragraph on Salome with 2 pieces of evidence. Again, the amount of evidence you include really depends on how many paragraphs you're writing. An entire essay should have no less than 4 quotes because you need to show your understanding of language. So however you divide that up is kind of up to you. But you should read through this example on your own and ask me any questions if you have them. So this is your task. This is what you need to do. You've got today in class and next week in class to write a full essay on Duffy's poetry. Okay, so Salome and Medusa. I am going to mark it to give you an idea of where you're sitting. It is really important that you do this essay, partly because, one, we haven't written an essay yet in English, and you just don't know what's going to happen at the end of the year. You might need to sit the exam, even though you don't think so now. Maybe, you have to write this essay. This is non-negotiable. There are planners available on Teams, which I will show you shortly. Your essay is due on the 3rd of September at the end of the double spell. So you can type it and email it, you can print it, you can handwrite it. It's entirely up to you as long as I get it. And right at the end here are your essay questions to choose from. I've given you 5. These will all work for the poetry. It really depends on what you want to talk about and how you want to structure your argument. So if you go back to Teams, class materials again, poetry and essay writing, you'll see here there are two different types of planners. One has 2 paragraphs, one has 3 paragraphs. I don't expect you to download these and write into them, but you can have them open next to you to help you follow the structure, depending on your argument. I'll have paper copies as well available for you. This PowerPoint is the one that you are listening to right now, so if you want to open that separately, you can. So go forth, write your essay, good luck, see me with any questions.